Hi, I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com. I'm going to show you how to make this amazing Peach Prosecco cold process soap today. Now it is a super advanced recipe because we have our bottom layer, we have a swirl, we have an embed, we have texture. So if you've never made soap before, this is not the recipe to cut your teeth on soap making for. In the studio, that section, that tab at brambleberry.com has tons of beginner recipes as well as any of my 3 books. So definitely, I honestly would get at least 10 recipes that are cold processed underneath your belt before attempting this recipe. Now that said, I know a ton of brambleberry.com viewers are very experienced soap makers because I see your orders, thank you. And so I'm really excited to share this recipe with you. So let's talk design. This is so advanced for a variety of reasons. One, it's one main batch, meaning you have to let this harden while you try and keep your swirl fluid. So we have one layer, we let it harden, and then we also get to do a drop swirl that can't break through that first layer. That alone is a little difficult. Then you wait, you get your texture on top, and in addition to that, you had to make your embeds ahead of time. So that's why it's an advanced recipe, because you're really dealing with temperature, you're dealing with trace, and we do a 10% water discount because we did use titanium dioxide in there. We all know, well, you may not know, but titanium dioxide does lead to glycerin rivers, which are fine, but do kind of change the look of the soap. So we did a 10% water discount in here. Because of all of those things, that's what makes this an advanced recipe. And I'm super excited that you're gonna tackle it. And when you do, I wanna see it on Instagram with the hashtag BrambleOn, so I can definitely see what you did with this recipe. So the first thing we need to do is make our spheres. And this is the Brambleberry medium 9-ball mold, and I love it because check out how easy these pop out. These little circles, these little spheres, they pop out perfectly. I made these earlier, I made them ahead of time for us, but don't worry, I'm gonna take you through the entire process. And they are flat on one side, which is fantastic for easy placement when you are trying to make sure that you get these placed properly and perfectly in your soap. So these embeds stick out of the top of the soap. It's important that they not sweat. Melt and pour soap is really great because it has added glycerin in it, which is a humectant that draws moisture to the skin and also to the soap. So we're using the cold process melt and pour soap from Brambleberry. Has less glycerin in it, which means less glycerin due for you, which is important since those embeds are sitting at the top exposed to the air on your bar of soap. So this is 8 ounces of light cold process soap from Brambleberry, the melt and pour, and we're just gonna melt it in the microwave on 30-second bursts until it's fully melted and fluid, and then we're gonna work on our color. Getting the perfect kind of peach color for our toppers took 4 different colorants. So this is the Iridescent Gold EcoGlitter from Brambleberry, meaning it washes cleanly down the drain and then actually degrades, meaning it's not gonna get into fish or streams or anything like that. So that's really awesome. Then we have our Sunset Orange, and we're gonna start with just a little bit. And the reason we start with just a little bit of our colorants is because you can't take them out. You can always put more in, but you can't take them out. Tiny little bit of our Magenta Mica from Brambleberry, tiny little bit. And just a little bit of the super pearly white. And again, we're just gonna stir this up. We're gonna see what we get. I did about 16 teaspoons for each of those, and then I did just about 3/4 of the teaspoon of that EcoGlitter. I'm noticing I'm getting a little bit of kind of mica bubbles in there, so I'm gonna take my rubbing alcohol and squirt the top to break up the surface tension of my mica bubbles and get all that color fully dispersed into my soap. So this is pretty close to perfect, but I'm just gonna do just a little tiny bit more orange, literally like a 1/16 of a teaspoon, nothing major. Again, we can always put more in, can't take it out. And we really are going for kind of that perfect peach Bellini look. But you guys, it's soap. If I don't get the perfect peach Bellini look, no one's gonna know except you and me and anybody else that watched this video. So this is perfect, really happy with this colorant. And now we just use a steady hand and pour into our mold. And I like to pour about 3/4 of the way out for this one. I find that the soap is just a little bit easier to release when it's not poured all the way flush with the top of the mold. Gives you a little bit of airlock release. Let's spray with a little bit of rubbing alcohol just in case there's any bubbles that need to be popped. And set these aside. They're gonna take at least 2 to 4 hours to harden up. Because this recipe has so much going on, I opted to use the Brambleberry Swirl Quick Mix. Now this is a mixture of oils that I designed based on my years of experience with soap making, that gives a pretty long time to work with your recipe. So it doesn't set up very quickly. And you'll notice that it has, these are your harder oils, and they've gone to the bottom, they've solidified. So I'm just gonna probably pop this. You can kind of, if it's room temperature, you can kind of mix them up, but I just wanna make sure I have the full fatty acid profile, especially those harder oils incorporated in really well. So I'm gonna toss this in the microwave, probably at 30-second bursts. What's super cool about these bags, you guys, they are microwavable, which is really awesome. So just make sure the spout is on really tight, toss it in the microwave for 30 seconds. Let's see if we get these oils clear. So you can see this is fully melted now, it's all clear. And we can check the temperature in the bag, or we can just check it in the container, and I'm just gonna check it in the bowl. But before I do that, I'm gonna suit up for safety, since now I'm gonna start introducing lye into this process. And we all know that lye is a corrosive, and my eyes are really important, so I'm gonna goggle, I'm gonna gloves. Give me just a second. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna pour our swirl quick mix into the bowl. And then we're gonna work on prepping our colorants and making sure we have the right amount of fragrance oil. This is the perfect amount for this batch, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pour the entire thing in there. I really love this recipe because of the final bar, great lather, rinses off well, but because of the composition, it gives you a really long time to work with it to get that perfect swirl. Now I'm gonna mix up my colorants, and this is the Sunset Orange Mica from Brambleberry, and I've dispersed it in a lightweight oil, sweet almond oil in this case. And then this is the Magenta Mica from Brambleberry, also dispersed in a lightweight oil. And I'm just using the mini mixer to work out any sort of clumps, because if there's any clumps in the final soap, it's not that big of a deal, except the clump, when you're bathing with it, literally bursts on the skin, leaving drag marks of colorant down your skin. And that's so cool. So that's why we pre-mix. The entire batch is colored with titanium dioxide to whiten it up. So I'm just gonna dump 2 teaspoons of titanium dioxide into all of my oils and use a stick blender to break up any of the clumps. Burping the stick blender to get all the air bubbles out from underneath this bowl, so we don't inadvertently stir in air bubbles. The fragrance we're using for this recipe is Brambleberry's Peach Prosecco. I love the fragrance because it gives us such a long time to work with it in the soap. It's got notes of lemon, obviously Prosecco, some mango, some melon, and some base notes of musk to really give it staying power. It's fantastic in the finished product. It's also really good out of the bottle. Whoops, just realized I need a little bit of tangerine wow mixed up because it really helps to brighten up that sunset orange color. So I'm just gonna mix that up really quickly. I did 1 teaspoon of tangerine wow and 1 tablespoon of lightweight oil. So now I have 3 colors, my magenta mica, my sunset orange mica, and my tangerine wow color. And that is gonna make the perfect colorant for this amazing Peach Prosecco Peach Bellini soap. So now it's time to add my lye water carefully to the soap. And this lye water already has sodium lactate in it. And sodium lactate is the salt of lactic acid. That's just a fancy way of saying it helps to harden the soap and make it easier to come out of the mold earlier, and it also helps to provide a little bit of shine. It's a totally optional ingredient, but I will tell you, whenever I am using a silicone mold, like I'm using for this Brambleberry 5-pound wooden loaf mold that has this optional silicone loaf liner, I always use sodium lactate. I'm going for a really light trace here. And another thing that makes this an advanced recipe is the titanium dioxide makes it difficult for you to see when you're reaching or achieving trace. I'm going to fragrance my entire batch. Again, remember, this Peach Prosecco fragrance from Brambleberry acts so beautifully that I can fragrance the entire batch, even though I'll be working with just about 1/3 of the batch for a good solid 5 minutes. This rest of the batch will still stay fluid. Now I'm going to split off 30 ounces of this soap, and this is going to be our base, that bottom layer. And I want this soap to be very fluid. I'm going to work with it just a little tiny bit to get it a little bit thicker so that bottom layer sets up, but not so thick that I get anything but a very smooth flooding of the mold. Put this soap here to the side. Now I am going to have to work with it a little bit over the next few minutes just to kind of keep it fluid. So I'm going to keep it at arm's length. So this colorant that we're working with right now, the Sunset Orange, we're going to go with 2 teaspoons of the dispersed colorant. And this is both, this color, this base that we're working with right here is both going to be our base, so the very bottom layer, and also what's going in for our swirl. So keep that in mind. So we're doing 2 teaspoons of that dispersed sunset orange, 1/2 teaspoon of the dispersed tangerine wow, and again, that's just to add some brightness, and 1/2 teaspoon of the dispersed magenta mica from Brambleberry. And these are all really stable colorants. I love working with them. And now I'm going to put my colorants really out of the way. I cannot tell you how many times I have spilled dispersed colorants in my soaping lifetime. It is not fun. Now I'm just going to whisk this in, and I will hit it with the stick blender, but I don't want my trace to be too thick here because I really, really want to have this be a perfectly fluid line for my base of the soap. But I also really want to get those colors fully incorporated in, so I will do just a little bit of stick blender. So burp, burp, burp. Remember, we don't want any of those bubbles in. This is the Brambleberry 5-pound wooden loaf mold. We make it right here in Bellingham, Washington at our facility. I'm pouring this slowly and gently, flooding it. Remember, we do need to reserve a little bit of the colorant for the swirl, and we definitely don't want any sort of trailings, so that's why this trace is so thin. So it's about just 7 ounces left of this colorant. I like that. And now, this is where some of the advanced technique comes in, because the advanced technique of weighting is difficult. Just gonna make sure everything is tamped down. This is perfect. I see no ripples, I see nothing. I do want to keep my soap base really fluid, so if I see this hardening up at all, I might just give it a quick whisk. So I'm going to get a fresh whisk because my whisk currently is covered in orange. So it's been like about 5 to 7 minutes. My bottom layer is, you know, it's pretty set up. I feel good about it suspending a very thin, careful layer. This is getting just kind of a little bit thick. I mean, I would call this a thin, barely medium trace, definitely a thin. The previous batches, I did a drop swirl directly in here. So I poured the white and I dropped the orange in. I'm actually going to do an in the pot swirl because I'm seeing the viscosity of this and thinking an in the pot swirl is going to be better. So I'm just going to do an in the pot swirl. So in the pot swirls are really fun and easy to do. You basically take your orange and you pour it in from a variety of different points. Some people do like, oh, I'm going to do 9 and 3 and 6. I kind of tend to just do it a little more circular, a little more sporadic sometimes. And then you have choices. You can either decide to just give this one real quick figure 8 to pre-swirl it, or you can leave it as is. The main thing, you don't want to overmix this, because if you overmix it, then you don't have a swirl. But if you undermix it, then you also just end up kind of with blobs. So, but remember, it's soap. No one really cares. It's going to be great no matter what. I'm going to start pouring this in one of the corners. I'm going to try flooding. So flooding is this technique where you let the soap kind of run down as opposed to pouring back and forth like this. If the viscosity is good enough, we'll be able to do that. So we shall see. I'm going to just do this, and I'm going very slowly because I don't want to break through that first layer. And you can see the soap is flooding in beautifully. And I love the design I'm seeing from up here. The smell is also really nice. It smells so good. And now that I'm getting a little more soap, I can start pouring faster, which will get my soap flowing down the mold faster. Swirl is really interesting. I can't wait to see this cut. It is just flowing down like a beautiful river. Boy, this the Peach Prosecco Fragrance Oil from Brambleberry is fantastic to work with. You guys, this has been sitting here for like 5 to 7 minutes and it's still flowing smoothly. Give us just a little wiggle, even us out. Okay. Gorgeous. So now I'm going to let this sit, and then I'm going to work on some texture, but I need to let it sit so it'll sustain the texture. Okay, I can't let any soap go to waste. I'm just going to pour this down here. I'm going to ruin my perfect design here, but that's because you guys remember we're going to texture the top. So as much as this is painful, remember we're saving this is like 4 ounces of soap. So it's a big deal. So now we're going to wait just probably about, honestly, it's gonna be another 5 minutes. I'm sorry. I hope you have dishes to do or something, because it's gonna be another 5 minutes before this texture gets to be thick enough that we are gonna be able to manipulate it to make a really cool top. Okay, so it's been a solid 10 minutes, and this should be a really good consistency to maintain some texture. I'm not gonna put gloves back on, but I am gonna put goggles back on just to be on the extra safe side. You can never be too safe when it comes to your eyes, right? We only get one set of them. So I'm taking the back of a tiny spoon and just giving this some texture, not a whole lot. And I noticed that this is suspending really well. Now, if your soap wasn't suspending really well and it was starting to kind of pull back on itself, what you'd want to do is just wait for another 5-10 minutes and make sure that you were getting the texture you wanted. And the reasons it doesn't do that is it could be a trace issue, could also be a heat issue. So if you're making this in the summer and you're in a really hot shed or something, the heat can really change the consistency of this. And so now I am just gonna I'm just playing around a little bit because I don't want these to be perfectly uniform. Kind of just want a little bit of differentiation. Then it's gonna be time to place my little beautiful peach Bellini balls. Now remember, these are flat on one side, so we're just gonna put them in, and we're gonna put them in down like that, and then we're gonna also have them touching. And the reason we have them touching is because these are actually make a pretty thick bar of soap when you cut in between. Like, we're talking a 6-ounce bar of soap when this 5-pound loaf mold is poured to the top. So I have these touching for that reason. They make a really hefty bar of soap. This is the gold iridescent EcoGlitter from Bramble. And again, it's totally biodegradable, so I love it. And I like to use it through the strainer just to kind of make sure there's no clumps. So I'm just straining it on. I love the sparkle and the sheen it gives. It's very subtle. It makes it so appealing. Also makes it really festive, very soiree-like. Okay, and now it's time for our gold bursting beads. I really like these because they provide such a beautiful texture on top, and they are also biodegradable. So they make this look really festive and very, very, very happy. And again, biodegradable, so they can go down your sink, they can go down and they'll dissolve perfectly. Now I'm gonna spray with 99% rubbing alcohol. I find that it helps a little bit with the soda ash. Quite frankly, this is such a thick trace, you probably won't get soda ash anyways, but just to be on the safe side, a little bit of 99% rubbing alcohol. And then I'm just gonna let this sit in the mold for a solid 4 days, at least 3 to 4 days before I try and unmold it. And then it'll be ready to use in 4 to 6 weeks after that. So I made this batch 3 days ago. It's got that 10% water discount, and it also has sodium lactate. But I did pour it a really thin trace, so I'm kind of expecting it to be super soft. One of the ways I tried to mitigate this was on day 1, I pulled these sides gently away from the soap to help with the drying that does happen during the cure process. I love the silicone liners for the 5-pound mold. They save so much time because you don't have to line your mold, but then they also really help with the soap coming out cleanly and easily. So I'm just gonna gently start kind of pulling these silicone liners out. And again, this is about 3 days old, and I'm expecting it to be really soft because, as you saw, we poured it at a very thin trace, and it is soft. I can see it kind of giving me a little bit of trouble on the edges already. Now, because of these beads on the top, you could cut sideways down, but I actually haven't found that they cause a lot of drag marks. But if you are finding that you get drag marks as you're cutting straight down, you can always turn it to the side, flip it on its side to avoid the drag marks. Okay, I'm gonna cut the first bar. Notice I have a non-serrated knife. That's pretty key. Let's all cross our fingers that that bottom layer stayed straight. Here we go. This first bar is gonna be pretty big because of the placement of that great ball up here. Okay, so just pull straight up as opposed to pulling out. And then you swirl this off as opposed to pulling out because you can tear it. And perfect. So you can see this line stayed really straight. And because we did that 10% water discount, I don't see any glycerin rivers either, which is fantastic. So I'm just gonna keep cutting the rest of the bar and see if I was able to maintain that perfect line throughout the whole bar. So far, so good. I love how these swirls are turning out. It's kind of ethereal, very Peach Bellini-like. Thanks so much for watching today. I really hope you found this inspiring, and if you did, check out the In the Studio tab at brambleberry.com for more tutorials, tips, and tricks. And until next time, you guys, I can't wait to see what you create. Hashtag Bramble on. Main part of the prep is the Brambleberry Medium 9-ball sphere mold. It's made out of silicone, so it's fantastic to release and get these beautiful conical spheres. Is conical spheres a misnomer? Is that a thing? That's not a thing, is it? Conical spheres is not a thing.
Those are two different geometries.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Damn it, I have to redo that. Okay. Where are the empty conical spheres? Yeah.